Hello everyone, good day to all of you. Wanted to spend a bit of time to really hone in on some of the nuances on what I prefer and why between underhand, in other words going underneath the AK right here to reload it, versus tilting this to the side, going over the dust cover and racking it that way. So I have spent a lot of time using both methods. Actually, when I first was getting into AKs for several years, I did prefer the over the dust cover method. Nowadays, I pretty much universally prefer just keeping it here and going underneath for reasons I'll explain later, but there is advantages to both. I think there are overall more advantages to going under, but starting with the overhand method, going over the dust cover, flipping it 90 degrees or thereabouts. Overall, I think that this is in just a marginally slightly easier technique to understand. Not like either of these are particularly difficult, but let's start with this. So of course, take your mag, pop it in here, then turning this sideways. What this allows in theory is that you have complete unrestricted access to the charging handle. There's nothing in the way. For example, when you flip it like this, and then you can just rack it and you can actually watch the round feed into the chamber, which I always do think is a good advantage of this. But the cons of this type of method, if you'll see, so right now I just have an EOTech on here. It doesn't really cause any issues, but if I were to have a larger optic, for example, a couple years ago when I first started this channel, I actually had an LPVO on here when I was doing this build series, and something that you'll run into if you either have a larger chest rig or especially a plate carrier is when you try to turn this, this is really going to want to hit into your gear, so you'll have to go a little bit further out where this is further from your center of gravity and less comfortable, a lot more straining on your arm. Now you'll still be able to support this, of course, on your forearm, but either way, it's not the most optimal. And not just with larger optics. If you just have a generally heavier setup, there's a lot of movement involved with this. Of course, you need to actually flip the rifle and support it with this arm here. Compared to going underhand, you still have some movement, but overall, it is a bit less and a bit more consistent, which is going to be a point I'll bring up a lot. Regardless of your AK setup, it's going to be just pretty much the same sort of muscle memory when you go underneath. Moving now to how to do under the dust cover. There's actually two methods which are just ever so slightly different just based on how your hand is positioned, which I'm going to discuss. I do think it's actually important, even though it's a very minor detail. So how that looks, of course, go here. Hear the click, goes empty. So I'm pulling this into my workspace just ever so slightly, just stock going into the armpit, kind of pushing it down here for extra leverage, coming out, and somewhat beside the point, I might do a different video on this, but I like to rake the old mag out with my thumb, so I kind of stick it out the side here and just push it out that way. I don't like using the actual magazine itself and kind of using that so-called Spetsnaz style, but then just going up here, like I said, so I'm tilting it a little bit inwards towards me. You don't always have to do this depending on your exact AK setup. Like I said, I like to do this for the consistency of it, that way it's across the board with any AK I pick up, but on this one I'd probably find if you have a stiffer recoil spring, you'll want to leverage it here. I'm just kind of pushing it into my rib cage for extra force on it, and then taking my thumb, actually, so just kind of the inner portion right here, putting it right on the part of the charging handle where it dips down, and just pulling like that and letting go, just letting my hand slip back towards my forearm here. So the important nuance there, the reason I say there's kind of two methods of doing this, is what I see a lot of people do is, of course, everything will go the same. They'll go under here, but then instead of using their thumb, they'll actually flip the hand over, which for one is also more movement, but they'll flip the hand and grab with the with the palm of the hand, just kind of right here. Reason I don't like that, for one, like I said, more movement for sure, but also if you have a sharper dust cover, which I still think it does sound kind of ridiculous, but AKs, especially a lot of the older import ones, they'll have, the dust cover especially will have some sharper edges. I've cut my hands several times on my AKs on that. Not really too much of an issue if you use your thumb. It keeps your whole hand further away from the dust cover. And of course also, if you're using this with gear, so even if I had a plate carrier on right now, it'd be the same thing. So like I said, I'm leveraging against my rib cage. If I had a plate carrier, this would just be ever so slightly further out, but point of balance doesn't really change, unlike with going overhand, like I said, flipping it 90 degrees towards me instead. It's just all very consistent. Again, if you have a larger optic setup, whereas this method, overhand, would get a bit awkward. Here, again, it's the exact same. Doesn't really change the point of balance very much at all. So I wanted to show that same technique just one more time. This time just not talking through it, just doing it in full speed, just so you can see everything and how it looks when I'm not discussing every step separately. So coming up, of course, with I just have one round in the chamber for now. Hearing that click. Now personally, as far as speed is concerned, I have found this to be the quickest method as well. Personally, I wouldn't worry about every single type of reload method at least that I discussed today. There's some other ones that are objectively a lot slower, but between all these three, if you're worried about speed, none of them are particularly faster or slower. I think, for example, this going over the dust cover, it's ever so slightly slower, but if you absolutely want to be watching the round feed into the chamber, I totally get that. That is a very valuable thing to do, but like I said, other than that, I think that the cons of going over the dust cover outweigh the benefits. So, hope you all enjoyed this video. This is just a really quick, little nuanced take on just some of the minor parts of AK reloading. Wanted to do this video just because I was just looking at some of the old comments on, I made some AK reload videos long ago when I first did this channel, which I've since unlisted now because the quality is absolutely terrible. But yeah, I just wanted to touch on some of the nuances, which definitely, I remember getting some comments about this, and I don't think really it's ever fully discussed too well in the depth that I would have liked. So there you go. Hope that this was informative. If you disagree, agree, or have your own experiences with maybe something else entirely that I didn't cover in this video, then I really would love to hear that if you want to leave that in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if nothing else, hope to see you all in the next one. Take care. See you all then.